In 1940, the Nazis organized the Einsatzstab Reichsleiter Rosenberg. Do you know what that was? No, but I'm guessing it wasn't devoted to increasing the sum total of human happiness. You would be correct. It was the bureaucracy assigned to loot the collections of France and Western Europe of any artworks of interest to the new rulers, especially the collections of Jews. Our Krebs is assigned to the Paris office, the richest lode of all, and here he specializes in record-keeping. He knows what has been looted from whom and where it is kept. So he goes on for 4 years, and then comes 1944, D-Day. The Allies advance, and the ERR pulls out of Paris with trainloads and truck convoys of artworks. Some of it was stopped by the French resistance. Tons of it were found by the Allies, but a lot of it disappeared and remains lost to this day. In late 1945, Horst Axel Krebs was arrested by the British, tried at Nuremberg, and given a 2-year sentence. That seems fairly light, I said. Yes, but at the time, as I suggested earlier, mass murderers were getting 10 years or less, and he hadn't actually killed anyone as far as they knew. Just a thief was Horst Axel. So by 1949 he's back in Munich, contributing to the economic miracle. He has a little gallery on the Kirchenstrasse, where he sells harmless landscapes and flowers to burghers refurbishing their war-torn homes. Obviously, he's poison to the legitimate art market. He's investigated up and down by the Allied occupation authorities. They have a whole dossier on him. But as far as anyone knows, he's clean, just a businessman. Well, time goes on. The anti-Nazi fervor fades away, and everyone is just a good German trying to get by and be a bulwark against communism, etc. And meanwhile, little Werner is all grown up, with a diploma from the Ludwig Maximilians University in Art History and Conservation. He now settles in Frankfurt to get a little distance from the father in Munich, and also because Frankfurt is where all the money is. He's taking a hand in the family business, of course, but the real business, not the Kirchenstrasse Gallery. What was the other business? I asked. Well, you know, the remarkable thing about the Nazi looting is that they kept nearly impeccable records of everything they took. For example, at Nuremberg, at the trial of Alfred Rosenberg, the prosecution presented 39 thick volumes that catalogued everything they'd confiscated, with photographs of the art. There were hundreds of such volumes in all. The Allies seized roomfuls of filing cabinets with tens of thousands of index cards, descriptions of the art, who they took it from, and so on. So let's say it's the middle of 1944, and you've been stealing art and making these very catalogs for 4 years, and you're a smart person, and so you know that the Nazis are finished. And suppose you wanted to feather your nest after the war. You might contrive to search out a selection of valuable pieces, nothing too showy, and neglect to place these pieces in the catalogs. And naturally, you would strip out the relevant index cards too. And you would choose just those things that belonged to Jews who had died in the camps, and who left no survivors at all. For someone with Horst Krebs' old Nazi connections, that information would be easy to get. And then you would use the excellent forging capabilities of the SS to generate phony bills of sale, so that instead of, say, a nice Pissarro being sold to a Jacques Bernstein of Paris in 1908, it was shown as being sold to a Kurt Langschweiler of Geneva, Switzerland, same year. Then after the war, Herr Langschweiler's heirs supposedly sell the painting to the respectable firm W.H. Krebs of Frankfurt. Yes, we know that the proprietor is the son of the notorious Horst Axel Krebs, but in the Federal Republic they do not look too closely at what your father did in the war, or else there'd be no business at all. Old Krebs died in his bed in '79, by the way, a pillar of the community. And he still does this? I asked. I mean Werner? Not anymore, and there has never been, to my knowledge, any solid evidence that he ever did it. As I said earlier, the Nazi horde was so enormous, and the artworks went through so many movements and changes of custody, and so many people had access to them during the crazy years, that countless pieces were lost track of. It's just a fact that the younger Krebs made his initial fortune selling small, well-chosen Impressionist and early 20th century pieces he bought in Switzerland. Plenty of Jews shipped stuff out to Switzerland in pawn to raise money after they were stripped of their livelihoods during the 30s. Then they were murdered, and the artworks belonged to the people they sold them to. The phony provenances were a nice added touch, a little insulation, and the SS forgers who did them for Krebs are deceased, most of them having been prisoners of various kinds, Jews and so forth. So there is nothing but hearsay against him, but there is a lot of it, and it is consistent. By this time, we were in the Campo in front of the great white elevation of San Zaccaria, and we paused under the shallow portico to get out of the rain. "Did you ever meet him? Krebs?" I asked. "Only once. Krebs was offering for sale a Derain landscape that the French authorities spotted as the property of a Paris clothing manufacturer named Gamine. The man and his family had perished during the war, but a son had escaped to England, and it was his heirs who were making the official claim. Well, not to bore you with the details, but Krebs admitted he had made an error, that the provenance he had was a fake, and he handed over the painting with an apology. And, well, I looked at the painting, and I had experts look at the painting. The experts said it was Derain. The paint was good, the canvas and frame, but all they had to go on was a faded black and white print. I thought it was a fake, but my opinion wasn't probative, and so the return went through. So what happened to the original? I mean, if you were right, a buyer could never sell it on the open market. True enough, but you realize there's a substantial closed market for artwork. There are any number of people who want to own old masters and impressionists, far more than the honest market can supply, because obviously most of the works are in museums already, and the old masters are, well, dead. There are no more in the pipeline." "Interesting. What did you make of the man himself?" "Charming, cultivated. He knew a great deal about pictures, and not just as a dealer. He truly loved the work. One would think that the stories were true, that he had held on to the remainder of the Schloss paintings." "Schloss? I never heard of him. Modern?" "No, he was not a painter. Adolf Schloss was a broker for department stores and purveyor to the Russian imperial court. He was a fabulously wealthy Jew, a French citizen, who assembled what was probably the finest collection of Dutch old masters in private hands, back around the turn of the 20th century. Just the sort of paintings that Hitler and Goering liked best. To make a long story short, the Nazis seized the 300-odd paintings in the collection and shipped them to Munich and stored them in Nazi party buildings there. Hitler was planning a vast art museum in his hometown of Linz, and this depot was where they stored the things they were going to stock it with. In April 1945, the Allies entered Munich, by which time the collections had been thoroughly pillaged by various Germans with access to it, and later the Americans did some light pillaging of their own. The Schloss family eventually recovered 149 of these paintings, with the rest scattered or lost. Evidence presented at the elder Krebs's trial showed that he worked at the Munich depository in the winter of 1944, and that he left the city with 2 vans and a military escort in January of 1945. We have no idea what happened to those vans or what was in them. Old Krebs never talked, and young Krebs has always denied knowing anything about any stolen old masters. In fact, he always dealt in more modern pictures when he was becoming established.